Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our public virtual budget meeting for 2022. I welcome you on behalf of the Board of Trustees of Prairie Spriit School Division. Thank you for joining us this evening and for your support and participation in public education in our communities. I am Jan McIntyre, the chairperson of the Prairie Spriit Board of Trustees. The other people who will be speaking tonight are our Superintendent, Cheryl Mangin, and Jill Mangin, our Secretary-Treasurer. The Prairie Spriit Board is made up of 9 trustees from various catchment areas. 1 seat is currently vacant, and so the board now consists of 8 trustees. The trustees are attending this meeting tonight remotely via the same link as other participants are using. Here's a listing of the trustees and their catchment areas. With our virtual format, there's a few housekeeping reminders that we hope will improve your experience of the meeting. To begin with, for better viewing, we would encourage you to use the full screen option found in the bottom right corner of your screen. That will help the charts and numbers presented to be more easily read. As always, questions and comments related to our presentation tonight are welcome and may be made through the PSSD email address that will regularly be visible on your screen. We'll do our best to answer your questions. The comments and questions will be received by Jill and Cheryl and sent to the appropriate person for answering. If questions are received after we have moved on to another topic, we will move them to the end to the Q&A and we'll answer them then. Given that we are not meeting in person, we ask that you please identify yourself with your comment or question. Before we go further, we would like to thank our tech department, and in particular, Troy Sigvaldason, for the work he has done to enable this virtual meeting to take place this evening. I also want to acknowledge the superb leadership that both Cheryl and Jill have given the division as we've moved through this time of pandemic. We cannot say strongly enough how immensely valuable their work has been, and along with the exemplary work of our staff across the division, our students have moved through this pandemic as well as any students anywhere. I also want to publicly thank the people of our communities for your active engagement during the Bill 64 struggle and for your overwhelming support of our board and the role of school trustees in our communities and province. It is people like you, including our rural municipalities and individual citizens across our province, who rose up and simply said no to Bill 64. These are the people who have enabled school divisions and school boards to continue in Manitoba. You very clearly told our provincial government that local representation and our local schools are important to you, and we thank you for that. Our board is committed to working on behalf of our rural students, schools, and communities, and to sharing information with our communities. With that in mind, we sent out a public letter in early January explaining the reality we are currently facing. While it is true that Bill 64 is gone, trustees have been significantly disempowered over the last year, and as a board, we feel these changes are detrimental to local education in Prairie Spriit. Since our last public budget meeting, the province has moved to centralized bargaining with our teachers, meaning that we no longer have any input into that very significant portion of our expenses. And we've also lost that important avenue of communication with our staff. The province also continues to cap our levy increases, meaning that we no longer have the ability to go to our local ratepayers to address shortfalls in funding or to fund local project needs. All funding is now fully determined by the province, by those people working for the province living in Winnipeg who are not familiar with the local needs of Prairie Spriit students and the challenges of providing education in our sparsely populated section of rural Manitoba. In the past, we have used our levy to finance needs specific to our division, such as our new bus garage, our distance ed infrastructure, a number of literacy and numeracy initiatives, hands-on learning initiatives for students of all ages, additional staffing needs. These are just some of the things we have included. But they're all things outside the provincial funding structure. Without access to that avenue funds, as you will see tonight, the impact on our students is going to be costly. We have raised these current concerns with the Minister of Education and with finance people within the Department of Education, but to date have been told there's no extra money. Essentially, our hands are tied. Over the last 6 years, Prairie Spriit has taken a 2% annual cut in provincial funding, and our local levy increase has been capped at 2% annually. With ongoing inflation, higher now than it's been in 30 years, an arbitration awarded wage settlement, and a stable student enrollment, this simply does not cover expenses. We have repeatedly made cuts from an already lean budget and are now at the point of having no alternative but to consider staffing cuts and another year of a deficit budget. It should be pointed out, while the province made their funding announcement February 4th, what really happened is their numbers were incorrect, and it took until late in the afternoon last Friday, February 18th, less than a week ago, for them to get our final funding numbers to us. As a result, we are continuing to study options. I will invite our Superintendent, Cheryl Mangin, to speak on relevant education topics, and then when she is finished, our Secretary-Treasurer, Jill Mangin, will present the draft budget. This will be followed by a question and answer time and closing remarks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cheryl Mangin. Our division priorities continue to be literacy, numeracy, and engagement, with an overall goal of meeting the needs of our students as they grow and learn, preparing them to enter and be successful in the workforce or with post-secondary experiences, whatever they choose. We continue to collect and analyze data to provide direction and planning to meet the needs of our students. And we use blended learning as a way to both prepare our students for online components of their work and as a way to supplement our rural face-to-face education. When we do spend money, we check to see how it worked, value for students for our dollars. A couple of examples of some of our literacy work this year was the Pause Writing Program, K-6, and developing consistent formative assessment systems utilizing the Manitoba data tool to allow us to analyze data to guide our teaching. Similarly, in numeracy, we expanded the MRLC numeracy assessment program to include grade 4 this year, and we include data entry and analysis into the data tool to check how we're doing and guide our teaching in numeracy as well. In engagement, we continue to use the CASTLE framework to address social emotional learning, to advance any lagging CPS skills. We use and expand our CPS model. Next slide, please. COVID continued into this school year, as you know, but in the 2021-2022 school year, COVID had minimal impact on the attendance of Prairie Spriit students, with the exception of the 2-day extension to Christmas break and the 1 week of remote learning mandated provincially. Only one public school experienced a closure and moved to remote learning as a result of COVID-19, and that was for a total of 4 days. Our colony schools, in consultation with myself, made decisions regarding temporary suspension of in-person classes when necessary. Teachers have had to teach synchronously when students are sick or symptomatic. Otherwise, students are expected to attend class in person this year. There is no option to choose remote learning from PSSD teachers. A small number of families, less than 5, have chosen to access the Manitoba Remote Learning Support Center for remote learning rather than attend our schools in person. Those families are committed to the Manitoba Remote Learning Support Center until the end of June. Since January 2022, in-person attendance in PSSD public schools has been above 90%. Although some students have been absent, isolating, or ill, the majority of our student population has been attending class as planned. As of February 15th, Schools are now in the yellow level of the pandemic response system. Students are masked and 2 meters apart as much as possible. Masks are not required while being physically active or when outside. In terms of attendance, regular attendance numbers in February are usually around 95%. Last week, we were at 94%. So we're very satisfied with attendance in Prairie Spirit schools right now, even in yellow. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill Maja, the Secretary Treasurer. I'll begin with some information about the COVID-19 response funding that we have received from the province this year. The 2021-22 Safe Schools Fund received from the province is $414,134. The province provided the following priority areas: mental health and well-being, where we are projected to spend $16,214 on professional development and training for principals, teachers, and educational assistants. Under safe operations, we are projected to spend $43,660 on cleaning supplies and ventilation. And under learning impacts, we are projected to spend $354,260 on additional staffing in classrooms, including teachers and educational assistants and other technology supports needed in the classroom. We also received a grant of $56,261 for learning recovery. This is being used to increase staffing time for school guidance counselors. Moving into our pre-budget community survey, we had over 100 responses from parents, staff, and community members, with parents providing the majority of the responses. This slide shows the responses received from parents. On the left-hand side, in response to the question that was asked about what educational priorities are important to you, the responses that occurred most frequently are in a larger font. You can see that numeracy, literacy, and engagement were some of the most frequent responses amongst parents. On the right-hand side, in response to the question if provincial funding is decreased, how do you feel Prairie Spirit School Division should respond? 68% of parents indicated increased taxes. 18.7% indicated reduced programming in schools, and 13.3% indicated reduced staffing in schools. Moving to the responses received from staff. On the left-hand side, the most frequent responses on educational priorities of staff were numeracy, literacy, and engagement. And on the right-hand side, in response to the question, if provincial funding is decreased, how do you feel Prairie Spirit School Division should respond? 80% of staff indicated increased taxes. 13.3% indicated reduced programming in schools, and 6.7% indicated reduced staffing in schools. Lastly, moving on to the responses received by community members. On the left-hand side, the most frequent responses on educational priorities of community members were numeracy, literacy, mental health, life skills, and STEM education. And on the right-hand side, in response to the question, if provincial funding is decreased, how do you feel Prairie Spirit School Division should respond? 75% of community members indicated increased taxes, 12.5% indicated reduced programming in schools, and 12.5% indicated reduced staffing in schools. Presenting on facts about our current school year, the current year's budget is just over $29.6 million. Current enrollment is 2,097 full-time equivalent or FTE students. This counts kindergarten students as half-time or 0.5 FTE as they attend school every other day or on a half-time basis. 1,105 students are transported on 46 bus routes. and the teacher staff total is 169.79 FTE, and there are 199.245 FTE in support staff. Enrollment is projected for the 22-23 school year to be 26 less students compared to this current year. The further out our projections are, the less accurate they are. As families move in and out of the division, it becomes more difficult to track future students. Additionally, the school days for the 2022-23 school year will be 194 days. The province sets the start date, the end date, that there are to be 10 administrative and professional development days, as well as the total number of school days that each school division is required to comply with. Before we move into the draft budget for 22-23, I'll briefly present the comparison of the 2020-21 budget against the provincial averages. This is the most recent report that the province has released. Here is the revenue comparison. PSSD provincial revenue is lower than the provincial average, which results in a higher than average municipal funding. Expense comparison by program indicate that Prairie Spriit spends a larger percentage of the budget than the provincial average in the classroom and a larger percentage in busing due to our large geographical size. When comparing against expense type, we are fairly comparable to the provincial average. Moving into the 22-23 draft budget projections, beginning with revenue, provincial funding of schools has decreased by 2%. Total revenue is projected to increase 3% compared to the 21-22 school year and includes $362,330 of accumulated surplus. The special requirement shown here is less the education property tax credit and tax incentive grant, as well as the property tax offset grant, as the province provides this funding. With it included, as shown at the bottom section of the slide, the special requirement for the 22-23 school year is $15,300,002, or a 2% increase compared to the 21-22 school year. Here are the 22-23 draft budget projections for expenses. Overall expenses are projected to increase 3%. This is attributed to wage pressures. I'll go through the detailed changes to expenses in the operational impact slide coming up in 2 slides. First, to summarize the financial highlights of the 22-23 draft budget, which represents a 3% increase in expenditures. The budget also meets the administrative expense cap requirement maximum of 3.37%, with Prairie Spriit spending only 2.79% on administration. Provincial funding of schools for Prairie Spriit has decreased by 2%. Additionally, one-time funding of $843,800 to address incremental wage costs and other pressures has also been granted by the province. While this is appreciated, it does not cover the full cost of wage increases. The province has provided the following additional grants this year: a special needs grant totaling $59,497, the property tax offset grant of $617,314 to hold the municipal special levy at the same amount as the 2020-21 year, This means no increase in property tax bills for our residents within the Prairie Spirit School Division limits. The provincial revenue is approximately 56.4% of total revenue. The municipal revenue is approximately 41.6% of total revenue. Lastly, the accumulated operating surplus is $955,775, or 3.7% as of June 30th, 2021. The information on funding from the province was finalized on February 18th, as previously noted by Jan. The board is currently deliberating on the draft budget presented tonight with the following considerations: staffing changes, teacher staff reduction by 1 FTE, support staff reduction of 0.5 FTE in a vacant position, expenditure decreases across all departments due to the 2% decrease in provincial funding, including a decrease in school field trip budgets, increasing the student fees for field trips, decreases to the professional development budgets, and decreases to the school technology budgets. Now looking at the tax implications of this draft budget. The special requirement is collected through property taxes, which are determined by 3 levels of government. First, municipal taxes are determined by your municipality and are used for municipal operations. The Education Support Levy, or ESL, is levied by the province and are combined with other general revenues of the province to provide funding to public and private schools. The remaining portion of your tax bill is levied by the school division. To illustrate how the difference between the special requirement and special levy are, we've provided a visual. The special requirement of the 21-22 school year makes up 57% of the 2022 PSSD special levy for property taxes. The special requirement for the 22-23 school year makes up 43% of the 2022 PSSD special levy for property taxes. The percentages 57% of the prior year and 43% of the current year are prescribed by the Department of Education. Together, they make up the 2022 PSSD special levy of $15,129,002. The total special levy that is raised by municipalities in the division is comprised of the PSSD special levy, which is increasing by 2%, the DSFM special levy, which is increasing by 4.1%, less the tax incentive grant, which is the same amount as the last year and funded by the province, and less the property tax offset grant, which is also funded by the province. This results in a 0% increase to the special levy. The total special levy to be raised is $15,191,914, the same as last year. This means that the education property taxes will not increase. Lastly, here are a few examples of property taxes for Prairie Spirit. The market assessment increase from the 2021 to 2022 years in each of the categories represent the divisional average assessment increase determined by the province per category. For instance, residential average increase across the division was 1.6%. So on a $200,000 property, that increases the assessed value to $203,104. Due to an overall property assessment increase of 0.6%, the mill rate has decreased by 0.62%, thus moving from a mill rate of 9.1499 to 9.0933. The lower mill rate results in, for the average residential property, an increase in Prairie Spirit property taxes of approximately $7.61 based on an increase in the assessed value. For the average farmland quarter, a decrease of $5.21 before provincial rebates. And for the average commercial property, a decrease of $7.20. Cheryl, are there any questions in the inbox for me at this time?
No, there is not.
Okay, I'll pass it back to Jan for her remarks. Thank you for your time. Jan, you're muted.
I knew I'd forget something. Thank you, Jill, for your presentation and for the hard work you've put into this budget to date. And I know we'll be working with you into the future on this. And Cheryl as well, thank you for your work and your contributions towards it and for your presentation this evening as well. Tonight, the board has brought to you a draft deficit budget of $30,443,401. Utilizing $362,330 of accumulated surplus, staffing reductions, and further decreases of professional development, field trip, and school technology budgets. The local levy will remain unchanged due to the provincial grant that is applied to offset increases. Only 2.79% of this draft budget is spent on administration, well below the 3.37% that is allowed. The problem is not that we are top-heavy. The problem is insufficient funding. While we appreciate provincial funding that has been allocated to us, it is simply not enough to cover inflation. Our student enrollment has remained relatively consistent, but for the 6th straight year, the province has cut our funding by 2%. This simply is not sustainable. With no other source of funding, we have no wiggle room left. Our board and administration have worked hard to avoid cuts in the classroom, but have come to the point where that option is regrettably being considered. We met with the Assistant Deputy Minister this week to discuss this problem. While she was unable to promise more money at this time, she did indicate that she is committed to raising these concerns with the provincial treasury. In the days and weeks ahead, we will continue to assess possible changes to this draft budget. The province has announced they will be revamping the public education funding formula. Our board will be making a funding review proposal to the Education Funding Formula Review Committee, raising our concerns. While we here in Prairie Spirit may not be one of the larger population divisions in the province, our students nonetheless deserve to receive their fair share of education funding, something that clearly is not happening with the current funding formula. As a board, we commit to you that we will continue to advocate for our Prairie Spirit students. Thank you for your participation in our virtual meeting tonight. We appreciate your interest and support of education in Prairie Spirit and invite questions now if you wish to submit them through the email site. So people are asking about the availability of the YouTube after this, and yes, it will be available. Copies of the enrollment breakdowns by school are available. Is that not part of the handout, I believe?
Yeah, the handout will be posted to the website.
Okay, perfect. Jill, did you want to address the question about the reserves outside the bus fund reserve?
Sure. We have two other reserves outside of the bus reserve. One for accessibility, like accessible washrooms, and the other one is for repairing gym floors.
Thanks, Jill.
Jan, I'll just add, related to that question, that the
Yeah.
province only allows us to set up capital reserves. We are not allowed to set up operating reserves.
Correct, yes. We'd invite you to submit further questions. We have a quiet group this evening. Thank you very much for your interest and your support of public education and Prairie Spriit. As your board, we are very grateful for the communities that support us and have supported us so meaningfully. Feel free to contact trustees if you have questions as well, and check our website for the information that's posted there. Thank you very much, and good night.